by building our experiences in the outside world and everybody thinking that that was what API was about, open APIs. Then we could also resell the story that we already tried to sell internally for years, that APIs, disconnecting front end and back end and putting business logic into your back end. We could resell that story in a more practical way because we could show the outside world and we could present how the internal organization should work. Internet wasn't that big. We were still we called it WAP stages, so it wasn't internet on mobile, but you could see that functionality on a smaller screen would become a big thing. And suddenly when we launched mobile and did a first MVP and then added new functionalities and new versions of it, now it's one of our biggest channels. We cannot become lazy in that learning experience because if you look at where big techs are and how they connect digital ecosystems, they are far, far ahead of a lot of industries. And if you become lazy in that sense, you become less relevant.
Hello and welcome to the API Resilience podcast with Mark Winberry and Christoph van Tomme. Today, we've got a special guest with us, Koen Adolfs, who is the lead product owner at ABN AMRO, who's going to talk a little bit about their API program and some of the exciting stuff that they've been up to. How are you doing, Koen?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
So thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm always really excited about hearing to hear how you're evolving and how your team is progressing in this long API journey, because I think, becoming an API company is an API journey. And there's a couple of things that you've been up to lately that make you stand out, I think. So it's great to have you on board to hear you tell your story.
Thank you. I'm happy to share some insights and experiences and also to get other companies on that road again as well, because I do think that a lot of industries need to go through the transformation that we are going through at the moment.
And I just want to say that it's a pleasure to meet you. I've seen a lot of the work that you've done on your developer portal. It's excellent, and I know that we look at it as an example of a lot of implementation of great practices. And there's a lot that people can learn just from looking at your portal. So it's a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to this conversation and, helping our audience understand some of the aspects of your digital transformation and what's made it successful, and how they can weather the current crisis by creating stronger relationships with their partners, their customers, through their developer programs and their API programs.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of a special case because, a lot of people in the Apigee ecosystem, I often talk about Koen has been doing this and Koen has been doing that. And it's been, I know that you're often being shown as an example of this is a dev portal done well. And I think it's been very interesting because I started saying this recently, is that a great or anything you do, it's never about technology alone. And I think that's definitely the case for dev portals. Just the dev portal technology alone is just technology. It's just a constraint that without the work that you need to put into it, it's not going to give you the results that you need. So I think when I started working on my dev portal maturity model, it was interesting to see that on both dimensions, both on the business alignment and on the operational maturity, that on both dimensions, your team is actually going ahead and charting the ways. So can you maybe tell a little bit more about how come that you're doing content so well? Because I think what I see a lot of our customers, it takes a long time until they really get it that we've got a dev portal now, and now we have to start iterating on our content and figuring out like how is our content really going to address our customers' needs. And somehow you figured that out. How did you get there?
Yeah, so then I also need to share a bit how I became a product owner of open banking and lately also enterprise integration technology. Because what you share, that other companies need to go through a lot of culture change and education, I needed to go through myself as well. So it has been years ago that the first ideas were presented to Europe, to European banks, about a new regulation, Payment Service Directive 2, in which third parties could get access to transaction data of bank customers. And that was a mind-blowing concept at that point. And at that point, we didn't think about developer experience yet. We were mostly thinking about what would that mean for our business model? Which kind of opportunities can we gain, but also what are the threats that we need to cope with? And it was really strategy and business strategy that we needed to deep dive into. And when we had some sort of theoretical model, like this is what the threats could be and this is what the opportunities could be, we also found out that we needed to build some capabilities. So obviously, then you need API management to share your APIs to third parties, but also to consume APIs from others to your own internal organization and build from there. And when we got there, like, we're now building the APIs for that regulation. We have the capabilities to consume APIs of other banks as well. Then let's think about that other block in the theoretical model of which other opportunities could we gain by deep diving into which APIs could we provide more, and also what are the essential capabilities to really gain that opportunity, because only providing APIs from a regulatory point of view, you wouldn't deep dive too much into how do I offer that product. You see that a lot of banks as well, when they only have that compliance mindset, then their developer portals are often a bit off, because it's only, I need to comply, here's the documentation, here you can sign up, and that's it. What we tried to do was really look into which products do we already have in our organization, and how can we build an open API on top of that. So the strategy that we already have for that product can become more successful. And that's also how we ended up looking at Tiki. And Tiki is one of our peer-to-peer payment platforms. So where if I'm going to a restaurant with people, I want to share the bill, I can use Tiki to split the bill. And a lot of companies looked at the functionality and they liked that, and they had a lot of use cases where they would like to have that interaction as well. And then we got that idea, like, oh, this is a fitting API where we could build our experience upon beyond the compliance APIs. So when we invested in API management and we invested in the Tiki API, we also developed the developer portal. And on the side, we also organized a big Beyond Banking hackathon, and we invited APIs from a lot of other companies and other companies to a big event to present their developer portals, their API products. And for us, that was the first, how do you say it?
Come to Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. to present what we've built along the way and to see how developers would respond to that. And we also learned that the onboarding on that part, we need to tweak that a bit. We get quite some questions about technical documentation on these and these items. And because we had that hackathon and we really could see 260 developers struggling on bits and pieces, we also knew where we needed to improve before we launched our developer portal. So then we invested some time in that as well. And then 2 months later, we could launch the whole developer portal. That's for the developer experience part. That was the first part of the journey. But what you also need to stand and imagine is that working at a big bank and transforming a big bank into a new digital mindset, and especially banks where data is closed and you keep it with you, you really need to get your story right in order for an organization to be able to want opening up some piece of and bits of their building blocks. So building a good story externally was not only useful to build a good experience for the outside world, but it's also the outside-in view, how you can, that can help to transform your own organization if you're working in a big company as I do.
I'm wondering how much of the strategy development, how much selling did you have to do internally to help the people in the more traditional parts of the bank understand the value of what you were doing and to see those opportunities? Because, you mentioned a lot of banks that just do compliance portals and they stop there. That's a very natural reaction for what tend to be more conservative organizations. And so whenever you were working on those strategies and those opportunities, how did you present those and how did you get support, and how does that continue to work for you?
So we launched our developer portal in 2017, but my actual journey in the part of open APIs, that started in 2014, 2015. And first I needed to learn myself what this would mean for a bank and which storylines would fit in my head so I could understand how a business could transform. And by looking at how, for instance, Philips Hue transformed Lightning and how Uber and Google Maps are working together, I got some useful storylines which I could also help to others to understand how that transforms the taxi industry or the maps industry, or how you order, how you get train information, etc. And those experiences that everybody is aware of on their mobile phones, but actually doesn't know how that works, being able to sell that internally and show those use cases to internal people and building that storyline, that's something that I invested time in 2014 to 2015, started to spread the first words within the organization, growing crowds, over 300 people internally. So we are a company of 23,000 people in total. And I think that with my stories during those years, I've touched about 5,000 to 7,000 people within the organization just by inspiring how banking could transform based on what you see in other industries. And then having spent time on those opportunities and threats of what PSD2 could offer, that helped to create some sense of urgency as well. Like, we really need to deep dive into this topic, else we won't find the gains. And by organizing the Beyond Banking Days, again, it was about showing the internal organization how different banking and development can be if you just set a lot of developers together and build new stuff. It was creating that vibe that we needed to spend quite some money on, some money and some time on. And when we launched our developer portal, towards that, it was really like getting through hurdles every time. But once you're out there, you're suddenly the normal channel. you're just one of those things that a bank should offer. We were the first main Dutch bank within the Netherlands to provide a developer portal, but now you see that a lot of the banks have it. But by having spent a lot of time in sharing that inspirational story as well, you also see that some managers at the commercial banking side, corporate banking side, started to form their own teams, deep diving in which kind of APIs could we offer to our own customers as a new channel, because especially corporate customers are very experienced in using third-party software to do banking, to look at their financial data. And you could see that at that part it sticks, and also the Tiki payments request story that sticks. And based on that, you saw that the organization was making steps. And what was interesting is by building our experiences in the outside world and everybody thinking that that was what API was about, open APIs, then we could also resell the story that we already tried to sell internally for years, that APIs, disconnecting front end and back end and putting business logic into your back end. We could resell that story in a more practical way because we could show the outside world and we could present how the internal organization should work as well. And that's a different transformational story, but that's where the angle that we're currently taking to transform the inside culture in order to take a next step externally in the future.
Very interesting. I think I'm learning a lot of things. Like we know each other for a very long time now. And there's a lot of new stuff I'm learning today. It's really interesting. Like I didn't know that PSD2 was the trigger for you. I thought that because you were busy with APIs way before PSD2, I thought that, that was a different driver. Yeah.
But the regulation started in 2012. In 2012, It was announced to the market. But the thing is that a lot of people within the bank didn't know about the regulation. And if they would know about the regulation, they didn't understand the impact. And it was only a very few people that had the view like, this is what I experienced on my own mobile phone with other things. This is what's going to kickstart it. And connecting that into API technology and what API technology is, that was new for me. But if I look to ABN AMRO, and that's also what I finished my last sentences with, APIs were already around within the organization for quite some time, but it wasn't a business topic.
Right.
And it was always that story for those at IT, and no one could share me where the abbreviation of API was standing for, what it means. They couldn't share it in an easy, explainable way. So because of PSD2, I needed to deep dive into the technology and how can I explain it easily to others. But the topic of APIs was already around within the organization, but was much more focused on at IT and a difficult sell to the business part of the organization.
I think what was interesting is that you also said earlier that I think that's something that you're doing different is this internal promotion and really focusing and paying attention and wanting to pay the price for internal promotion. I think that's also quite exceptional. Like the making it like almost like a brand experience, like the ABN AMRO API brand. And like I remember, like when we did that was our first conference together, that you had like the video afterwards, and then is this something Dutch, or is this something you, or is this something ABN AMRO, or where did this come from? Because this is not normal. I haven't seen a lot of other teams do it that way. So
I started at ABN AMRO in 2009 as a trainee, a management trainee, and the goal of a traineeship was to develop the future leaders. So a lot of time and effort was spent in my education, and with the hope that that people lead the organization to the future in whichever domain they are working. When I started to look into the topic of APIs and PSD2, I really got a gut feeling like if I don't get this story along within the organization, if I don't get that story right, the organization will struggle because of that, won't make it maybe. That was also the story back then. So I felt a big responsibility to bring that story back into the organization, which organizations spend a lot of time to educate me in the past. So if you work in a company for a long time, you build personal relationships and you want everybody to succeed, and that was for me also a big a reason why I wanted to spread that.
But
that was one part. Mm-hmm. The other part is, and I started to connect those dots later on, but in my youth I did world championships of dancing in front of 15,000 people, and being on stage, back then doing dancing, but now doing sharing your story, that was something that I also enjoyed, and I also studied in Japan with a professor, Gar Reynolds. He is also writing books about presentation Zen. How do you share your story? Was Nancy Duarte. She's also a big writer and professional in how you sell your story right. All those dots connected, and being on stage, presenting your story, presenting yourself, feeling the responsibility that you needed to bring this story internally, else the organization wouldn't succeed. That was just a mix-up, and that's something that is still going on. But now now you're on the ride where a lot of people join you, and it becomes much less about me. And I'm happy about that. It becomes much more about the organization and how are we going to succeed with APIs. And that's also a shifting point that we're trying to make. Yeah.
And actually, I just realized you are an internal developer evangelist. You're one of, like, maybe without actually explicitly being named that, you're a very good example of this is how you do internal devrel. This is how you get your organization excited about APIs and going on this journey. And I think that's a really big part of your success, I think, as an organization in the API scene. I've seen other organizations where there's an initial budget, there's the initial drive, but then it kind of like tapers off because there's no clear like cheerleader for the whole thing. So that's an interesting insight. Yeah.
I'm really interested in, if you retrospect now on the original opportunities and threats that you saw, how good was your prediction then, and what has what's panned out and proven to be true that you've either been able to mitigate or take advantage of? What has surprised you?
So it's often said that people and the society overestimates changes that can happen on a short term and underestimate the changes that are happening on a longer term. And if I look at how the story of open APIs and PSD2 was shared in 2015, it was definitely the feeling that once PSD2 would be there would be a big bang change, and suddenly the whole society around finance would work differently. And the story also of fintech was, give me all your data, bank, because we can do a much better job than you're doing. And along the way, you found out that there is a reason why there are banks around, and know your client processes and all the transactional monitoring and detecting financial crimes. It's a heavy duty job. So there is a reason why there is a bank. And you saw that fintech were struggling. On the other hand, you also saw that banks were struggling with getting that new technology in. And a lot of fintech that originally wanted to have the customer layer pivoted to being a strong capability provider, which a bank needed. And you see that started to merge and the story changed. Back then, big tech and payments wasn't a big thing. So you also see that story has changed. If I look back in 2015, and that was also my first sentence, we expected a big change at that moment, looking towards the future and where we are now, 1-2 years into PSD2. I do see there's a lot to discover and next steps, and towards 10 years from now, definitely big changes will have happened. But it hasn't been the big bang change overnight as we expected back then.
And I think this is also making it harder, like to show ROI, I think, and to show what is the business value of all of this stuff, because it's like, I think this APIs definitely have the Gartner hype cycle thing with the through of despair and then and all of that stuff.
It's interesting that you say that, because the return on investment is easy to present, actually.
Okay, interesting.
Because for PSD2, the reason why you need to have it is obvious. If you don't have it, you're not compliant, the regulator will come to you and you will have bigger issues. That's a difficult one. We also see that teams that had a strong consumer proposition, Tiki, wanted to move and build a business proposition. And because of APIs, you started to see that opportunity was growing. So over there, that return on investment was presentable as well. With multi-banking in our own internet and mobile channels, we can now offer multi-bank aggregation into our own apps. And that wasn't functionality that we couldn't provide before. But the biggest and strongest sell where we can present our return on investment is not actually an API product that is publicly provided on the developer portal, but a partner API that we share with other banks. And that's to check whether you have a valid bank account when you do a payment at another bank. And we found that a lot of wrong payments were done. And by checking whether you're doing payments at a valid bank account at another bank, that reduced the costs for customers, also the costs and the complaints we had as a bank. And over there was a big sell for open API technology.
Very interesting. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm always looking for, I think for me, the key is that this is not about selling technology. It's not about selling API management or selling dev portals. It's about, can we help our customers to become successful and to grow value? And can we really provide business value? So I'm always interested to hear those stories. Interesting. Good. Yeah.
I'm really wondering, Koen, there are always the part of what I was trying to get at earlier was there are always the how you perceive things and the intended consequences, and then there are unintended consequences. And sometimes those unintended consequences can be surprisingly good. And is there anything you can point to that was an unintended consequence, good or bad, that you might help people who haven't matured their program to the point that you are think about from your experience?
Unintended consequences. I think starting this journey as a whole is an unintended consequence, because deep diving into the API world, every stone you grab on the mirror, there is a lot of learning experience to gain. If you look towards the future, suddenly there are a lot of new discoveries that you can make, and there are so many angles to API technology that it's all an unintended consequence, and you need to connect all those dots. So if I talk about which APIs to offer with business development, that's a part of APIs. If I think about how do I provide support to developers, that's something that you need to deep dive into. How do you build developer communities? How do you build your platform? How am I going to write technical documentation? And a unintended consequence of those topics is that at first I was doing everything by my own and a few developers, and suddenly you need to connect a lot of people and share that experience to them as well and involve them, because it becomes too big to handle. And for me, there was also an unintended consequence that I needed to grow in a different type of leadership, to delegate and learn how that works, and then see which skill sets do we need to combine to take the next step. So it's a long learning experience, and I'm convinced that whoever at another organization wants to have a good topic where you can personally grow in for a lot of years, API technology is definitely the way to go.
Whenever you talk about what you're doing with the API program and what developers are doing and what you're able to do because of what you've done, and you discuss that within the organization, do you get the sense that the organization has come to recognize the fact that this has added value to the organization, and that ABN AMRO is perceived as being a leader because of a lot of the things that you have done?
For me, it's not I don't need to have the personal credits for that. So it's not because I have done it. What I find important that is, and towards the future, I also think that that's the only way that it can become successful, if business lines themselves think about what is my internal API portfolio. So how do I connect my internal products to the teams that are building mobile apps and internet banking apps, and how can I involve third parties in that relationship as well, and how can that be a whole business strategy for payments, for loans, for savings, instead of that there is a separate team thinking about open API technology and telling that this is what you should do. So for me, I don't need the organization to think, or others to think that we are the leaders in this field. We all need to be aware that there is a lot to learn, and that we cannot become lazy in that learning experience. Because if you look at where big techs are and how they connect digital ecosystems, they are far, far ahead of a lot of industries. And if you become lazy in that sense, you become less relevant in the digital world as well. So I don't need to be perceived as a leader. We're still at the beginning of our journey, and I think that will stay.
I guess part of what I was getting at is that, there's a lot of definitions that people throw around and a lot of meaning around digital transformation and what that really is. And I think that the answer is that it's different depending on what your business is. Obviously, you're on a digital transformation journey. And I saw some analyst figures that suggested that companies that have successfully or are successfully on their digital transformation journey have a market cap, 10+ % more than their competitors, and that is the result of their digital transformation. So I think part of my question is, besides having avoided any sort of regulatory penalties, is the organization appreciative of what digital transformation means and how important it is, and that it is delivering value?
I think that that's definitely the case. So if I look at ABN AMRO, and when I started in 2009, internet banking was around, but I also know the managers who started with internet banking, and they got a lot of questions back then. Why do you start a digital channel? And then suddenly it became big. And then with mobile, when I started in 2009, internet wasn't that big. We were still at, we called it BAP stages, so it wasn't internet on mobile, but you could see that functionality on a smaller screen would become a big thing. And suddenly when we launched mobile and did a first MVP and then added new functionalities and new versions of it, now it's one of our biggest channels. And if I look at the last few years, what you see as popping up is the video channel. So doing mortgage advice via video. 2 years back we started, I believe, and back then it was, we see that customers like it, but will this ever be the main channel? And then COVID-19 happened, and suddenly everybody is experienced in doing these kind of video calls, and this becomes a serious channel for a bank as well. So if I add up internet, mobile, and then video, and then because of regulation, but also corporate customers starting to request digital connectivity via APIs to their ERP systems, you just see the amount of digital channels that you need to support, and you also need to think about your internal digital ecosystem and capabilities in order to be able to support that. And automatically, technologies like AI and cloud and etc. becomes relevant, because else you cannot support all those channels.
So I think that brings us close to a topic that I also wanted to quickly touch on, is because you said in the beginning that you're now also responsible for the integration program. So can you talk a little bit more about like the internal API kitchen at ABN AMRO, and like how has that been growing, and how are you driving growth there, and what has that meant for the organization?
So again, over there we are in the learning stages. So APIs internally has been a story for quite some years. Obviously IT driven often, but by building the open developer portal, we gained a lot of experience in how to write technical documentation, do support, and how to do community building. And also that part that you shared, that developer evangelism, that API evangelism, that was a capability that I have grown, but also others in the organization. We saw that in order to take a next step internally, but also towards the open APIs in the future, we needed to homebrew that API culture, API first culture within the organization as well. How in the open API world, we built a nice developer portal as the face of our open API program. Then obviously, with all the capabilities you've built, you can easily copy-paste that into an internal space as well. One big difference is that the internal space, you don't need that much business documentation as you would for your open APIs, because it's much more about your internal capabilities. But what you do need internally is people to get that same mindset that an API is a product instead of a technical integration. So you need API product owners on business side thinking about features. We don't have those product owners at the business side. So how do you get that organization to change into that direction? Then again, it's sharing the story, politics, putting pressure, and having that phase, building the right stories on your developer portal. And what we're also doing is building an API makerspace in which we provide all the capabilities to our internal teams to make that leap whenever they are ready. So with a clear handbook how to get from A to Z, e-learnings, with technical writing guides, and connecting those dots between the external developer portal and the internal developer portal, because a lot of those things are the same capabilities you need.
And if you would do it all over again, would you start externally again, or would you start internally?
The organization already started internally way before me, but APIs was a difficult thing to sell. And although IT is powerful, the biggest changes within the organization are happening when business and IT are aligned on topics. Mm-hmm. And because of Agile, where business people became more responsible about IT deliveries as well, because of regulation externally, because of all kind of facets, things are changing. So I think that I cannot make a choice between the two, mm-hmm. because it's just a lot of components that come together, and in an agile world you cannot create the ideal world. You need to move within the field that you are at. So mm-hmm. I don't think that
there's no answer.
Need to make a choice. Yeah, there's no answer. Just start and learn.
Yeah. No, because we see both. We see customers that start internally, and we see customers that start externally. I think one of the traps that I see sometimes is that APIs are sold to business as like a product that is going to be selling, and it's like, and that sometimes it's oversold, and that there's more immediate value expected, where the long-term value is not that visible and not that clear, or not that well promoted. So, yeah.
Yeah. So if you start in the internal domain, then an API is just an integration mechanism, and no one is thinking about business models. And that story has been around within ABN AMRO for years. Just disconnect the front end from the back end, and by any technical means make it reusable. The open API domain started on top of that, but we sold it as a different story, and it's only in recent times that we are connecting those storylines, and you can sell it as a whole, and let's go API first. And then again, you need to think of what is API first. What is then an internal API? What is an open API? When do you need to earn money? When is it just indeed an integration, but with a third party, and business value comes from something else? In any means, API should never be the goal, but it's always a measure to accomplish something. And there needs to be a clear business view on that, and that's the thing you need to aim for that business view, and then an API is an enabler to accomplish that view.
Yeah, very interesting.
I'm interested in so you were really well positioned already for a lot of the changes that have been kind of forced on us because of the corona crisis. Mm-hmm. And it's nice that you were ahead of the curve there. So, kudos for being there. I'm wondering if there are any, we've talked a bit about the value that it has meant for ABN AMRO. Are there some partner or customer stories where you feel like, this has been a real win-win for both ABN AMRO and, some partner or customer segment or customer that you can point to that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't, built out your API program?
So one story I've One story I've shared, and that's that IBAN name check to validate whether your account is where you're doing a payment to is correct. Another one in the Tiki domain is definitely that NGOs now can more easily attract money for their purposes, and also within these times where NGOs are doing a lot of good things for society, that's a helpful tool as well. And you also see that Tiki is being used in a lot of different ways than we imagined up front. So IoT devices, or in shops, or in festivals. Unluckily, we cannot go to festivals at this time, but you see a lot of use cases coming up. What I find interesting currently is how corporate customers are starting to experience the things that we're doing with the business accounts insight API and with the business account notification API, and how they can automate their internal processes and save money in that regard. It are different kind of commercial APIs. It's a different channel. There are the first customers that are building their software upon, and you also see that there's a lot to learn, but I see promising results in that domain. For instance, in the logistics domain, so where packages should be sent when a payment comes in. These kind of real-time integrations you need, it can be definitely helpful.
That's awesome.
One of the topics that I'm currently really interested in is the democratization of developer experience, like the democratization of the use of integration interfaces and APIs and all kinds of digital infrastructure. And I think that has a big role to play internally in organizations, but also externally. Do you see any stories there already that you've been in touch with?
And with democratization, you mean?
I mean, like right now, APIs are about developers and are about enabling developers to make connections, but it's a very labor-intensive technical process. And there's a couple of low-code, no-code environments and things like that. But there's and that's like one aspect of it, I think, which is kind of like programming without code. But I think there's another aspect of it, which is offering already kind of pre-tuned or pre-developed solutions to accelerate an integration so that someone who doesn't know anything about programming can do it.
Exactly. So it's interesting because currently multiple people, including me, are intensively putting IoT devices in their house, and then there is a system called Home Assistant, and you can connect everything to it, and there's all kind of open source integrations that you can reuse in that regard. If I look to our own APIs, then I'll also see that integrations have been built, for instance, to Salesforce. So there was an integration party which connected Tiki to Salesforce, and then everybody using Salesforce can just use Tiki with a few clicks on a button. That same happened in Magento, so all kind of online shopping experiences built on top of that as well. And within the domain of corporate customers with the Business Account Insight API, you also see that ERP systems are an important domain. ERP and accountancy software packages, those are already those software tools that corporates are using, and if you can offer pre-filled integrations, predefined integrations, that will definitely work. And we see the first few examples popping up.
Yeah, very interesting. I think that's everybody becomes a developer kind of thing. That's definitely coming. And this digital infrastructure that we're building to help us sense and respond through digital channels, it's something that should be available to everybody, because I think there's it's basically a phase change between the pre and the post once you have these interfaces. And I've described it as going from plant-like life to animal life that suddenly starts running around and responding to stuff rather than just standing there and growing. Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of interesting territory, and we're coming up to the end of our time. And I would like to know, what kind of takeaways do you want to leave with the audience?
I think that it's whichever industry you are in, it's useful to look outside of your own industry. So my journey started by looking at what Google and Apple did, and not by what am I experiencing on my mobile phone, but how are they enabling developers and what is the result of that. And if you look at that angle and then think of where is your own industry at, how could that transform if that same digital channel, that same digital interaction with developers comes to our industry as well. And then I see that big tech and definitely also the travel industries have come through a lot of transformation already, and banks are now on that turning point, which is happening. If I look at where other industries are at, for instance, the health sector or the accountancy sector or notary, for instance, just fused to relate, they are often at the beginning stages of real digital services. And I think it's useful to look at other industries which have made leaps and which leaps that they come through, and really see which are then useful people to connect to, hear their stories, and start your own journey internally as well. With that same responsible feeling as I had, if I'm not sharing that story internally, the organization will not survive. I think that's something that I invite a lot of people to join on that journey, and then in the future we will connect all industries together, and what will ever come out of that is a new digital society.
I'm really glad that you talked so much in this discussion about the power of storytelling. Some of the most successful people I've worked with in my career have taught me the value of good storytelling. And to Christoph's, one of his starting assertions that, it's not about the technology. To me, it often comes down to, the ability to craft the story and frame it and tell it in such a way that people get it. So it's really great to hear how you've been able to leverage your experience in helping build a successful program at ABN AMRO through your storytelling.
And that's something that a lot of people can learn as well. Last weekend I've seen a video of Craig Federici, who went back to his university, and he's a lot of people will know him from Apple, selling the iOS software and latest devices with a lot of humor and good stories. And he was a really introvert when he was at university, and he was a real technical guy. And that video hasn't been watched much yet. It's from December 2019, but it really shows how he developed that strength along his career, and also how that influenced him in unexpected ways. He didn't imagine himself to come at that point. Again, I think it's a useful skill for a lot of people, and also a great video to watch.
Thank you. So, Koen, is there anything that you would like to share still with the audience? Something that they should go and have a look at, or something that you say like, okay, if there's one thing that I can ask of you, just go and have a look at this.
So I think it's useful when organizations connect and people connect and openly share their learning experiences along the way. Within ABN AMRO, we've built the developer blog. So if you go to developer.abnamro.com, you will find community. And there's a nice developer blog where we present how do you build personas when you are starting to think about your developer portal. But we also provide content, for instance, about how do you transform your organization into a DevSecOps, so development security ops organization. There's a lot of nice technical content, but also business content. And I think that it's a nice spot to start and connect and inspire across industries.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. This is really good.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been very instructional and inspirational. I've learned a lot and have enjoyed talking to you. So for this episode, that's a wrap. To our listeners, I want to thank you for listening. We hope these stories bring you new insights and encourage you to think about your API program and developer portal and how that can make your business stronger and more resilient. As always, please check the podcast notes for links, and we invite your feedback on this episode or topics. And let us know if you have something that you want us to talk about in a future episode, or guests that you think that we should have on because they've got some interesting stories. So thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the API Resilience Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for our latest episodes. You can contact us at podcast@pronovix.com, and until next time, be well.